They say betrayal never announces itself. It creeps in slowly, like a draft through an unseen crack. You don't feel the cold until you're already shivering. For me, it started with something so small, so innocuous, that I nearly dismissed it. But something in the way it lodged in my gut that night, like a stone dropped into still water, told me otherwise. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where the sky held onto the last shades of gold before sinking into blue. My wife, Lila, suggested we try a new Italian place downtown, Villa Rosa, she said, flashing me that easy smile she always wore when she wanted something to feel spontaneous. Our sitter was already booked for the kids. It felt good, almost nostalgic, like we were trying to remember who we were before diapers, school schedules, and work stress. We stepped into the restaurant just after 7. Low lighting, deep wood paneling, the scent of garlic and rosemary lingering in the air. It was the kind of place that made you want to sit for hours with a bottle of wine. Lila was radiant that night. She wore a slate blue dress that clung softly at the waist, hair curled just slightly like she hadn't tried too hard. She didn't wear that perfume often anymore, the musky jasmine one. Said it was too heavy for daily use, but tonight she wore it. We were led to our table near the back, under an old oil painting of a sunlit Tuscan street. Then came the moment that rewrote the evening. The waiter approached, a man maybe in his late 30s, slim, olive-skinned, with a warm but guarded demeanor. But when his eyes landed on Lila, everything changed. "Buonasera," he said, his tone lifting with familiarity. "Good to see you again." My wife smiled, and for a second, just a second, her eyes darted downward before she composed herself. "Hi," she replied, a little too quickly, smoothing her dress. I didn't speak right away. Something about the exchange caught me off guard. I studied the waiter's face. It was the kind of expression you give someone you know, not a friend, not a stranger, but something more complicated. "I'll give you both a few minutes," he added, placing the menus down with a subtle nod toward Lila. Then he disappeared between the tables like smoke. I turned to her. "Have you been here before?" She didn't look up. "Oh, no, I don't think so." I raised an eyebrow. "He seemed to recognize you. Maybe I look like someone he knows." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I've got one of those faces, right?" That answer hovered in the space between us like a mosquito. Small. Annoying. Not quite worth swatting yet. We ordered wine. Lila laughed easily through our conversation, bringing up memories of our early years together. She even leaned across the table at one point, resting her hand briefly over mine. Anyone watching would have seen a couple in love. But my mind was no longer at ease. The waiter returned occasionally, always polite, always efficient. But the way he looked at her, it wasn't admiration. It was recognition, like two actors slipping back into old roles behind the curtains. As the meal went on, I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The way Lila checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she seemed a little too present, a little too perfect. She laughed at the waiter's jokes, ones I barely heard. I excused myself midway through the meal and stepped into the restroom. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't know what I was reacting to. A man saying hello to my wife. Her mild awkwardness? Or was this just years of trust suddenly shifting under my feet because of a feeling? Back at the table, she was scrolling her phone. When she saw me, she locked it with a casual tap. "Everything okay?" she asked. Yeah, I lied. Bathroom line was just long. We finished the meal. I paid in cash, another old habit we rarely used anymore, and we left. She slipped her arm into mine as we walked down the street. The city was cooling off for the night, neon reflections gliding across the pavement. "That was nice," she said, leaning into me. "We should do it more often." I didn't answer right away. "Hey," I said after a beat. "You sure you've never been to Villa Rosa?" She stiffened just slightly. "Nope." "Why?" "Just something about the way the waiter looked at you." She laughed. Not loud, but high-pitched, practiced. "Maybe he's flirting with me. Can't blame him, right?" I smiled, but the edges didn't reach my eyes. That night, as she undressed and slipped into bed beside me, I watched her with a strange distance. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it, turning on her side, back to me. I stared at the ceiling. At 2:11 a.m., I got up and quietly stepped out of the room. I walked to the kitchen, phone in hand. I opened up her recent apps, scrolling carefully. Nothing unusual. But then I tapped into her messaging app. The usual names, except one. A. Just the initial. A dozen messages, all deleted. But the notification previews on the lock screen were still there. Little ghosts she hadn't cleared. Next time. Same place? You looked amazing tonight. I can still taste you. My chest tightened, and a tremor ran through my fingers. I felt cold, even though the house was warm. I locked the phone, placed it back on the counter, and walked out onto the back porch. The stars looked dim, blurred by the lights of the city. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves like whispers I couldn't interpret. I had no idea who A was, but I knew where to start. Villa Rosa, the waiter. He knew her, and I would find out how. By morning, my doubts had taken root, stubborn and clawing. Lila moved through our Saturday as if nothing had shifted, as if we hadn't just shared a dinner drenched in subtext and deception. She made pancakes for the kids, hummed while folding laundry, and asked whether I wanted to take a walk before lunch. I watched her, not as a husband watching his wife, but as a man studying a stranger who'd mastered the art of blending in. I declined the walk. She kissed me lightly on the cheek before heading out alone, sneakers squeaking faintly on the tile as she left. I waited until the front door clicked shut. Then I moved. I wasn't impulsive by nature. My work, civil engineering, demanded precision, patience, logic. I'd always prided myself on those qualities. But something had broken loose inside me since last night. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, only that I couldn't stand not knowing. I went straight for her closet. Not for dramatic reasons, not for perfume-scented letters or lipstick-stained shirts. I was searching for hiding spots. Lila was a minimalist. No clutter, no mess. The only things she ever hoarded were empty journals. But even those were stacked neatly on the top shelf of her closet. I ran my fingers across the spines. One felt too tight, too pristine. I slid it down. It looked like all the others, black leather, unmarked. But inside, this one had something more than poetry or half-finished to-do lists. Tucked between pages 15 and 16 was a receipt. Villa Rosa, 4 nights ago. 1 entree, 1 dessert, 1 wine pairing, 1 guest. I stared at the timestamp. Tuesday. She had told me she worked late prepping a marketing pitch. I turned the receipt over. Scrawled in the margin was a single letter. A. A jolt of heat burned through my veins. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was something. Something deliberate. A message or a signature written right on the back of a dinner she'd never mentioned. I returned the journal to its place, every edge aligned perfectly. Then I closed the closet and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady my thoughts. The air felt thinner in the room. I pressed the receipt flat and slipped it into my wallet, like a relic. When Lila returned, her cheeks flushed from the wind. She asked if I'd want to take the kids to the botanical gardens after lunch. I nodded, watching her zip her jacket open. She never once mentioned where she went. And I didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, I waited until Monday. After dropping the kids at school, I called in sick to work. I told Lila I had a migraine and needed to lie low. She left a cup of coffee on the nightstand and kissed my forehead. "Take it easy," she said. I waited exactly 23 minutes after she left before I grabbed my keys. Villa Rosa opened at 11. I was there at 10:52, parked 2 blocks away, nerves rattling in the pit of my stomach. I walked slowly, trying to look casual, as if I'd just stumbled across the place. When I stepped through the door, the same aroma from Thursday night enveloped me. Garlic, tomatoes simmering in olive oil, fresh bread baking in unseen ovens. There were no other patrons yet. A young hostess greeted me. I asked, "Is your manager in?" She blinked. "May I ask what this is about?" "I had a question about a reservation," I said, keeping my voice calm, polite. She nodded and stepped away. A moment later, a man emerged, early 50s, thinning hair, round glasses. He looked more like a high school guidance counselor than a restaurant manager. "Can I help you, sir?" I offered my hand. "Hi. I was here last Thursday evening with my wife. Fantastic meal. I think we had the same server she had a few nights earlier. Tall guy, olive complexion." He hesitated. "That sounds like Marco." "Marco," I repeated. "Right. Just curious, is he working today?" "Marco doesn't work Mondays." "Oh." I forced a small laugh. Would it be possible to speak with him? There was a misunderstanding about a dish. She swore he'd recommended something, and I insisted it was different. He offered a thin smile. "You'd have to catch him another day." "Of course." I pulled out a 20 from my wallet, palming it. "Would you mind telling me, Was my wife here last Tuesday? Now the smile faded. Sir, I really can't give out guest information. I understand, I said, placing the bill gently on the counter. I'm just trying to get clarity. That night meant a lot to me. I thought maybe she'd been scoping the place out as a surprise. He glanced at the money, then at me. A flicker of discomfort passed through his eyes. Off the record, he said quietly. I've seen her here before. Once, maybe twice. Always with Marco. I didn't blink. Thank you. He handed the bill back. Keep it. And, whatever you're thinking, maybe talk to her first. I left without another word. The air outside stung my throat. I walked in circles for 10 minutes before sitting in my car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Always with Marco. The phrase spun through my brain, over and over. I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly for hours, past office parks and through neighborhoods we'd once considered moving into. Somewhere near the edge of town, I pulled over and vomited onto the gravel shoulder. The sharp taste of bile lingered as I wiped my mouth and sat back. That evening, I said little. Lila filled the silences with stories about her day. I smiled in the right places. Nodded when I had to. Later, when she showered, I opened her laptop. She didn't log out of her email. She never had a reason to. I searched for Marco. Nothing. No emails. Not one. But when I looked at her calendar, buried under a color-coded sea of meetings and birthdays, there it was. V. Rosa, 7 p.m. M. Twice in the last month. The most recent, last Tuesday. I closed the lid quietly, breath tight in my chest. That night, I lay awake in bed beside her, listening to her breathing. She shifted once, sighing lightly, her back to me. In the dark, I whispered a single word, why? She didn't stir. But the silence after felt heavier than any answer she could have given. I didn't sleep for more than 20 minutes that night. When the morning sun spilled across our room, it felt almost disrespectful, like the world had no clue that something had fractured in me. Lila moved through the kitchen, packing the kids' lunches, humming softly. How long had she been humming that same tune? Everything she did felt curated, like an actress repeating scenes she'd already rehearsed a dozen times. When she left for work, I didn't bother pretending I was okay anymore. I waited at the window until her car pulled away, then walked straight to the basement and pulled out the fireproof box where we kept our shared documents. Insurance papers, birth certificates, old passports. I found her old planner, the kind she used before she started syncing everything to her laptop. Most of it was benign, grocery lists, appointment reminders, but one detail stood out. The last few pages were covered in crossed-out notes. One in particular caught my eye. Meet M. At cafe reschedule, too risky. I stared at the words. The date aligned with the week she told me she was at a team retreat. I snapped a photo with my phone. The next stop was her phone. I'd never touched it before, not out of principle, but because I'd never needed to. It was always nearby, always password protected. But Lila had a habit of plugging it in to charge while she showered, often forgetting to lock it. That morning, she did just that. I cracked the screen. The wallpaper was a photo of the kids on the beach, the same one we took last summer in Maine. I navigated to her messages. Nothing. Not a single text from Marco. Not even a contact named M. I opened the hidden photo folder, the one most people forget exists in their phone settings. There were a handful of saved images, screenshots of Pinterest boards, a few photos of the kids, and one that didn't belong. A table. A wine glass. A man's hand partially visible, resting too familiarly close to hers. The cuff of a white shirt, the faint outline of a forearm tattoo. Lila didn't know I knew she hated tattoos. She'd told me once, half laughing, that tattoos always made her think someone was trying too hard to be someone else. They're like masks, she'd said. But there it was. That faint ink design, just under the sleeve. A loop of something, maybe script. I stared at it for a long time. The photo wasn't scandalous. If someone else saw it, they'd call it innocuous. But the intimacy in it, the unspoken closeness, was undeniable to me. I backed out of the photo album and opened her email. Again, nothing. No messages, no folders, nothing even remotely suspicious. And then I realized something. Her deleted folder had been cleared. Recently, I glanced at the top corner. It showed, last emptied, 2 days ago. 2 days. The day after our dinner. The night I mentioned the waiter recognizing her. My blood ran cold. She was covering her tracks. Not carefully enough, but just enough to make her feel safe. I set the phone down as I heard the water shut off. I returned to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee I didn't want. She came down in her robe, drying her hair with a towel, and smiled. "Better today?" she asked. I nodded. "Getting there." She kissed my cheek and reached for her keys. "Long day. Don't wait up." She never used to say that. When she left, I sat at the table with my untouched coffee. My heart thudded in my chest like something trying to claw its way out. By noon, I was parked across the street from Villa Rosa. I watched as staff filtered in and out. At one point, the manager I'd spoken to stepped outside for a smoke. A few minutes later, Marco appeared, tall, lean, dark-haired. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly, his head tilted toward the sky. I didn't know what I planned to do. I just watched him. He didn't look dangerous. He looked like someone who used to be dangerous and had since traded in the habit. There was something relaxed about the way he stood, like he had nothing to prove. But that made it worse. This was the man who knew my wife better than I did. I waited until he flicked the cigarette and turned to go inside. Then I got out of my car and crossed the street. He saw me coming. Recognition flared in his eyes. "Hey," he said, confused. "You were here last week, right?" I nodded. "We talked briefly. I'm Lila's husband." His eyes sharpened. He straightened. "Oh, right. I just wanted to ask something." He glanced toward the door. "I'm technically not on break. Just a question," I said, cutting him off. He waited. "I know you've seen her outside of work." His mouth opened slightly. No denial. No outrage. Just a pause. "You don't have to say anything," I continued. "I just wanted to see your face when I said it." He looked me dead in the eye. "If I hurt you, I'm sorry." That answer hit like a hammer. It wasn't the words. It was the calmness behind them. The acknowledgement. The lack of fear. I took a step back. "Have a good day," I said, my voice hollow. I walked away, slower than I wanted to. I didn't want to run. Didn't want to give him that. Back in the car, I sat with my head resting against the steering wheel. I don't know how long I stayed there. That evening, I didn't speak to Lila much. She came home late, later than usual. Said something about traffic. She showered, changed, slipped into bed beside me. Her breathing was steady. Her phone buzzed once. She didn't reach for it. I did. While she slept, I opened it. There it was. A new message from a number not saved to her contacts. "Same place next week? Can't stop thinking about you." I stared at the message until my hands went numb. I copied the number. Opened a blank contact. Gave it a name. The Truth. Then I turned off the screen and placed the phone gently back on the nightstand. Lila shifted in her sleep, rolling toward me. Her arm draped across my chest. And I stayed there, eyes wide open, listening to the rhythm of her breathing and wondering how long it had all been a lie. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I was going to answer that message. I waited 2 days before replying. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed to become someone else first. Someone who wouldn't blink when faced with his wife's betrayal. Someone who wouldn't shout or crumble or demand answers. That version of me, the pleading husband, was dead the moment I saw the message. "Can't stop thinking about you." I borrowed a second phone from work, one used for project site management, and synced it to a new number. Then I saved the contact, the number from Lila's mystery texter, as M. I knew it was him. Marco. I had no plan, not a clear one. But I had direction. Sometimes that's all a man needs. Me. As Lila's same place works. Thursday. I stared at the blinking cursor, wondering if I sounded too eager. But the reply came swiftly. "M. You have no idea how happy that makes me." That night, I lay next to her as always, but something in the silence had shifted. Her breathing was too even, too practiced. I wondered if she was even asleep at all, or just pretending like I was. The next few days were unbearable. Lila became sweeter than usual, almost attentive. She texted me midday for no reason. She packed my lunch one morning. All of it meant one thing. She was hiding something she was desperate for me not to see. She didn't suspect I was already holding it in my hands. By Wednesday, I'd narrowed it down. There was a place 2 towns over, an old motel turned boutique lodge. I'd seen its name once in her calendar months back, buried under client strategy brunch. No client brunch would be hosted at a roadside lodge with rooms named after flowers. I messaged him again. "Me, same room." "M, of course. I already booked it." Booked it. The routine in those words, it told me everything. This wasn't something new. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a pattern. That night, I excused myself after dinner. Said I had to review engineering proposals for a bridge expansion. Instead, I opened the cloned folder on my phone. Every message, every image, everything that had passed through her private channels, now mirrored here. Most conversations with Marco had been deleted from her phone, but not from the cloud. I found voice messages, brief ones. She told him she'd missed the scent of his cologne, asked if he remembered the taste of her skin. And then there was the photo, taken from the motel's bed, a view of her leg, twisted in soft sheets, wearing nothing but his shirt. She'd captioned it, "Yours." My chest collapsed in on itself. Still, I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I moved. Thursday morning, I told Lila I had a site visit with a client about an hour away. She nodded, distracted, halfway through applying eyeliner. "Drive safe," she said. At noon, I stood in the motel parking lot, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I watched as a car pulled in. Her car. She stepped out wearing the same slate blue dress from the night we went to Villa Rosa. I could barely breathe. She looked around before walking up to the door. A moment later, Marco appeared. His hand rested on the small of her back as he let her in. The door closed. I didn't move for several minutes. Didn't blink. I was bracing myself for something I'd already known. Then I walked to the front desk. I handed the clerk a $100 bill and asked if I could use a room. Any room. Just for 20 minutes. "I'm not staying," I added. "Just need a place to make a private call." She hesitated, then handed me a key to room 206. Right above them. I went inside, opened the curtains, and slipped open the narrow window. It was enough to hear faint voices below. A laugh. A low moan. Her voice. I hit record on my phone. I didn't know what I'd do with the audio. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Then, I took out the second phone, the one I'd used to message him. I sent one final text. "Me, as Lila, do you ever feel guilty?" The reply came quickly. About him? Sometimes. But you're worth it." I didn't respond. I saved the message. Saved the audio. Took one last look out the window. Then I left. I didn't go home right away. I drove to a lake 2 towns over, sat on the dock, and stared at the water. My hands trembled on my lap. The air smelled like pine and algae and wet earth. I used to love this place. We came here once, years ago, before the kids, before the chaos. She dipped her toes in the water, giggled like a girl, said she'd never felt more at peace. I wondered if she remembered that. When I finally returned home, she was already there, hair damp from a shower. She wore soft clothes, her skin scrubbed clean, like she was washing away what she'd done. "Long day?" she asked. "Exhausting," I replied. We had dinner. She talked about her work. I nodded, pretended to listen. Her phone buzzed once. She silenced it. That night, I tucked the kids into bed. My son asked why my eyes looked puffy. I told him I was just tired. He believed me. Children always believe the people they love. At 11:22 p.m., I sent Marco one final message from the burner phone. "Me, she's mine." His reply came after a full minute. Who is this?" I didn't answer. I deleted the app, powered the phone off. That night, while Lila slept soundly beside me, I sat in the living room in the dark and planned everything. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. But I was going to end this on my terms. The next morning, I made breakfast. Smiled at the kids. Told Lila she looked lovely. Told her I wanted to take her somewhere new. Just us. No kids. No distractions. She blinked, pleasantly surprised. "Really? Really? Where?" "You'll see." She smiled, brushing a crumb from my collar. "You're full of surprises this week." "You have no idea," I thought. That night, I booked the reservation. Villa Rosa. Same time. Same table. Same waiter. She didn't see it coming. Not yet. But she would. Because this time, the surprise was mine. I chose the same table. Corner seat. Just under the painting of the sun-drenched Tuscan street. I remembered every detail. The texture of the tablecloth. The way the candle flickered in its little glass orb. The faint piano notes drifting through the air. When I made the reservation, I specifically asked for Marco's section. Lila didn't question any of it. She even seemed excited, glowing with the kind of light you only see when someone believes they've gotten away with something. She wore a black dress this time, not the slate blue one. Maybe she thought that was too risky now, too loaded with memories. Her lipstick was darker than usual. Her phone buzzed twice before we left the house, and each time, she silenced it without looking. She never mentioned who was messaging her. As we were seated, her eyes scanned the restaurant. casually but alert, like a mouse returning to a place where it once dodged a trap. I pretended not to notice. When Marco approached our table, carrying 2 menus, his reaction was instant and subtle. His stride slowed. His eyes narrowed. His jaw tensed, but only slightly, just enough for someone like me, who'd studied him, to notice. He nodded once. Good evening. Lila's voice was too soft. Hi. Marco kept it professional. Welcome back to Villa Rosa. Can I start you off with something to drink? I'll have the Barolo, I said. Lila nodded. Same. He left. No comment. No smile. No flicker of the man who once left lipstick stains on hotel pillowcases and texted my wife things she never said to me. I leaned in just a bit. He's polite. She paused. What? The waiter. You said you hadn't been here before, remember? But he seems to know you. Her eyes locked on mine, a beat too long. Did I say that? I didn't respond. I just smiled. I remember details. She glanced away. Dinner came and went. Every bite, every word, every carefully measured smile. I felt like an actor delivering a final monologue before the curtains dropped. Lila laughed at one of my stories. I laughed too. But underneath it all, the storm was still growing. When Marco brought the check, he placed it gently on the table, nodding once without a word. Lila didn't meet his gaze. I watched her fingers twitch slightly against the stem of her wine glass. After we paid, we stepped into the cool night air. The street shimmered from a light drizzle earlier in the evening, and the street lamps made the pavement glow. We walked in silence toward the car. Then I turned. Before we go, I said, there's something I want to show you. She looked confused. Now? Yeah, it won't take long. The boutique motel was only 10 minutes away. She didn't speak for the entire drive. Maybe she was running through lies in her head, trying to stitch together a cover before the thread unraveled. When we pulled into the parking lot, she shifted. What is this? I parked slowly, killed the engine, and looked at her. This is where you and Marco meet. Room 107. Same room every time, right? Her face drained of color. She blinked, opening her mouth, but no sound came out. You left your planner in the basement. You wrote it down once. Poor habit. She stared at me. I've known for weeks, I said, voice low. I saw the messages. The hidden photos. The calendar entries you forgot to delete. Wait, she whispered. You? I met him, I said. I heard you in that room. I stood above you both and recorded the sound of my wife becoming someone I didn't recognize. She reached for the door handle, but I locked the doors. Please, she said quietly. Please what? Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't plan for it to happen. I swear. I nodded. I believe you didn't plan it. But you chose it. Again and again. Tears rolled down her cheek. I never stopped loving you. I looked away. You did. You just didn't notice. We sat in silence. Then I took out my phone and pulled up the message Marco had sent me, the one he thought went to her. You're worth it. I held it out. She didn't take it. I don't want to destroy you, Lila. I just want the truth. She wiped her cheek, trembling. It started before the restaurant. I met him at a friend's party. We talked. I told myself it was nothing. How long? 7 months. My jaw clenched. Were there others? She shook her head slowly. Only him. Why? Her voice broke. Because he made me feel noticed. Alive. Like I wasn't just a mom or your wife. I'm not saying that's your fault. I held up my hand. Stop. Don't explain betrayal like it's a phase. She swallowed hard. I'm not here for revenge, I said. That was never the point. Then why are we here? She asked, voice cracking. I looked out the window. To end this where it began. She didn't move. You'll pack your things tonight, I said. The kids stay with me. You'll get weekends. We'll keep it clean. No drama. She started to protest, but I shook my head. I already spoke to a lawyer. I know my rights. You'll get what's fair. Silence. Then, will you ever forgive me? I turned toward her, eyes steady. I already have. She blinked. Because forgiveness isn't for you. It's so I don't spend the rest of my life hating someone who meant the world to me. Lila started to sob, quietly, the kind of cry that tears through the body and leaves everything hollow. I unlocked the doors. She stepped out, unsteady, rain beginning to fall again. It dripped from the eaves like tears from the sky. I watched her walk toward her car, fumbling with the keys. She turned once, hopeful. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I just watched her vanish into the mist. That night, I returned home alone. I went into the kids' rooms and kissed each one on the forehead, whispered that I loved them, even though they were asleep. I walked back to the bedroom. Her side of the bed was still warm. I stripped the sheets, pulled them tight again, and lay down, staring at the ceiling until dawn. And for the first time in weeks, I slept.